Hi, I'm Stephanie Rutherford, and I am going to be recording the rest of the sheep brain dissection. So the brain has already been dissected for a previous lab report, but I'm going to try to piece it back together and go back through and point out some of the major sections of the brain and cranial nerves and so on. So let's extend this down. Okay. As you can see, we've got our guy here laid out, my pile of meninges that I had peeled off earlier. So looking at the posterior aspect of the brain, the dorsal portion of the brain, here at the front we've got our frontal lobes. Then back here, kind of on the dorsal portion of the brain, we have the parietal lobes. On the side here we have the temporal lobes that kind of extend back in between. And then on the back of the brain, the posterior portion of the brain, we have occipital lobes, and those are both on the right and left hemispheres of the brain. So now I'm going to point out, as we're looking at this posterior or dorsal portion of the brain, the gyrus and the sulcus. So the gyrus are these elevated regions here, and the sulcus are these little kind of indentations or grooves in between, which they're very shallow, but it makes the gyrus look more elevated. Those are kind of what make up the little wrinkles of our brain that we show. Now the longitudinal fissure is where the right and left cerebral hemispheres actually connect. And I have dissected those so they can be cut in half. Show both those portions, again, right and left cerebral hemispheres. The lateral sulcus is a separation between the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe. So we can see here where that would separate and those two would come apart. Squish my brain. Okay, so we're going to move down to the back of the brain here. So again, we come back here to the posterior portion where you see the occipital lobes. This little guy back here is our cerebellum. Kind of like our little mini brain. So we have the body of the cerebellum here, the pons extends on off this, kind of bulges here, and then we have the medulla oblongata that comes in a little bit farther here and branches off, and we can see that. So now we're going to look at the ventral aspect of the brain, which is kind of like the front. Now, as I was taking the meninges off previously, these little guys kind of popped off with it, so I'm going to stick them back in place. So as we're going through the ventral portion, we have the optic nerves. So index down out here, and olfactory bulbs that stick out here, and olfactory has to do with our sense of smell, so these would come out to the nose and aid in that sense of smell. And we have the olfactory tracts that run back down to the brain. The optic nerves are these little guys that extend out here, and those would go out to the eyeballs. The optic chiasm, which here is where they kind of come together before they fork off into those optic nerves. The cerebral peduncle, so as we come down to the cerebral peduncle, it's kind of these branching vertical kind of pillars that sit just above the pons. So we sit here, you can see those guys kind of come up off of there. And now we're going to try to find some of the cranial nerves. I located most of these guys earlier, but they can be a little tricky in relocating. So first, we've got the oculomotor. So the oculomotor sits right about up here. So we can see they're a little bit bigger, some of the bigger guys, and they're on both sides. Sit there. We've got the trochlear nerve, which are smaller, and they come down right about here. Trigeminal nerves come up, they're farther back down here. And we've got the abducens, which kind of wrap up around the midbrain, or the cerebellum. So we can see those there. And they're much smaller, so we can kind of see those, they kind of poke up off of there. Now, if we go into we're going to take a look at the midbrain. So I'm going to separate the cerebrum from the cerebellum and kind of pull that down. Again, did this earlier, so it's a little looser than it was earlier. Now, what we can see in between here is the corpora I have some trouble with this one. Quadrigemina. So this is that section here that kind of extends down. And we have the superior colliculi, which are just under the pineal gland. The pineal gland, we can see he sits kind of right up in here. Kind of hard to make out. He's not very big. He sits right up in this area. And so, like I said, the superior colliculi sits just under that, and then the inferior colliculi sits just under the superior. So we have pineal gland, superior colliculi, and then inferior colliculi. So now we're just going to kind of go through the major portions. So I have the sagittal section of the brain. So sagittal means I've cut down the middle. So as I go through this, I have the cerebrum. Now I'm on the left side of the brain here, so this is the left cerebrum. The corpus callosum runs right through here. The fornix is a little bit smaller, runs right through this area. The lateral ventricles. Ventricles run through certain portions of the brain, so the lateral ventricle actually runs up through the middle of the cerebrum. So it's going to be a little bit hard to point out and see. Then we have the intermediate mass of the the thalamus. So our thalamus sits right up in here. Takes this kind of big area here. Again, that cerebral peduncle, we can see a little bit better now. Is that kind of forked area as it kind of branches down. You can see it sitting there. The pons kind of bulges out off of here off the thalamus. The medulla oblongata comes down around this way, and here we have our cerebellum. Now we can see the arbor vitae within the cerebellum, which is basically the white matter. So we can see gray matter here, and then the white matter that branches out in between, and that's that arbor vitae. And that corpora quadramina we can see here that branches down from that. Now again, the fourth ventricle, the ventricles we can't obviously see because they run through the areas. That runs through the midbrain, the pons, and the and the medulla oblongata. So that runs all down through that area. So just some of the major portions of the brain. Hopefully got all of them, didn't miss anything. Kind of difficult to see, but again, my name is Stephanie Rutherford, and that is for Bio 235. Thank you.